Tonight we wanted to talk about, various controversies that have been going on in the social media sphere.
Yeah, as the temperature gets hotter and hotter here in Texas, as people get hotter and hotter under the collar, there are some things just sort of slipping through the zeitgeist. And by zeitgeist, I mostly mean my Facebook memes.
Right.
That are, maybe deserve a little bit more than like a quick reactionary comment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's pretty much what we get nowadays, right? We get the sound bites, and then we get the reactions to the sound bites, and then we get people's reactions to the sound bites, and we never really get the depth.
I mean, look at Congress trotting up Mueller just to basically have him say, "I said what I said."
Right.
Read the damn book, because everybody
over and over.
Because we do live in this political culture of sound bites and gotchas and memes, and I'm not opposed to block captions, but some of these questions deserve a little bit more time. So hopefully we can come up with some answers tonight.
Mm-hmm. Well,
some new ideas.
Oh, yeah. I didn't mean to run over you. So first thing I thought of is my beloved Scarlett Johansson. Oh, Scarlett. Scarlett. I can't wait for the Black Widow movie. It's true.
So it sounds like this isn't necessarily a breakup, but there's been a rupture in the relationship?
We've had a rocky time.
Okay, all right.
Rocky time.
What is the controversy that Scarlett Johansson's gotten into this summer?
Well, I mean, she just seems to sort of want to be everywhere, all up in everyone's business. She decided that she would take a role generally thought of as an East Asian role.
We're talking about Ghost in the Shell
Ghost
2 years ago.
Which is playing Major Kusanagi. And more recently, she was slated to go into a movie being produced called Rub and Tug, which was about basically a mobster who was a trans man. She did pull out of that after a lot of backlash, but recently she came into the media once more in an interview in a magazine, which my brain is forgetting the name of at the moment.
Wait, so like a paper magazine?
Yeah, those exist.
Okay, all right.
No, they're real. They're real. They're not just memories that your brain is bringing back in the Matrix. They actually still exist.
Oh,
yeah.
And if Scarlett Johansson wants to play one, by God.
She would play
she can play a
magazine, by golly. Yeah, the specific quote that she said and what's being put into headlines, all over Facebook and every other place that the kids are these days, Instas and Pinterests and I don't know, I'm, old. But I should be able to play any role, any man, woman, tree, or animal. I love that she said tree.
I mean, if Disney wants to do a live-action Pocahontas remake, I guess she wants to be on that short list.
Every single role. She's Grandmother Willow. She's Johnson. She's Pocahontas. She's everything. And so yeah, when you look into the actual interview, which I have, even though I can't remember the name of the magazine, I promise.
Make sure to throw some links up to that in the notes to the show. But yeah,
it's a little more subtle than that. And basically, she admits that she understands that. Understanding of LGBT issues is growing and has grown over the years, and she learned a lot through the backlash that was levied at her when she tried to take that role. And she says that there's this increasing understanding of social responsibility in Hollywood, and she thinks that it's a good thing, but it's also sometimes, from a personal perspective, frustrating because as an actor, you want to be able to, you're trained to put yourself into any role.
To play a character, I mean, she's not Black Widow, so why couldn't she not be, a tree?
Right. And that's a normal thing for an actor to feel. This is what I do. This is how I make my living. This is how I make my money. This is how I eat. So, on the one side, there's that, and I get that. And on the other side, there's also the fact that there's not enough representation of certain groups in the media, especially in like big time Hollywood media. And so if Scarlett Johansson is taking up these roles that a Asian actress or a trans man could take, then that is someone else in Hollywood who probably wasn't even looked at because someone said, "Oh, hey, ScarJo? Yeah, get ScarJo.
Right.
She'll bring in the bucks." So, that's my first thought. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I do like the idea of movies as art, as performers, as artists, and I hate the idea of censoring anybody from being able to play any role. And I think that in a truly egalitarian society, we could be having that conversation, but the reality is that in the here and now, it does feel tone deaf to me. Am I being oversensitive?
No, not at all. I think that it's interesting, and I'm wondering how this would be received if it was a lesser-known actor, because I feel like a big part of it is just we know she doesn't need this role to eat. Like she's not like out there slugging it out with other actors. Like she walks in, she says, "I want this," and probably.
Although let's admit that she has earned the right, or if not the right, she's earned the opportunity by slogging it through and doing some garbage films and doing what you got to do to get to that point where now she can really pick and choose of among the best roles.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, what was it? Endgame wasn't exactly great to her.
Okay. If we're going to rehash the controversies of the summer, I say we just leave out any personal feelings about the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Poor Natalie.
Hawkeye, never mind. It's fine.
Hell.
But that being the case, I guess, as we're trying to kind of rapid fire tackle a lot of these, where do y'all come down at the end of that? Is she right that she can play any role, or is that irresponsible in this day and age?
I fall on the side of, let's see if we can. If nobody wanted to play the role, then sure. But we know for a fact that there are people out there, whether they're of a minority group, racially or sexually. Gender identity-wise, like there are people out there who need this exposure and who need these jobs in order to rise to the level that ScarJo has already gotten to.
And as we've seen more doors open for trans actors, it doesn't seem as if there's a lack of people willing to walk through them.
Oh, exactly. Or a lack of talented actors.
Exactly.
Like there are so many. We're going to be talking about Sense8 later. Spoiler alert. But like there are so many good actors who deserve these roles, or at least a chance at them.
Okay. So, Sarah, are you in agreement?
Yeah, the more that I see that sort of representation, the more I see us better represented. The more I see actual trans people in trans roles, speaking from my personal perspective, the more I see trans roles done well. I'll take Sense8 over Jeffrey Tambor's crap any day. And, I've loved what I've seen so far of Euphoria, which has a trans actress in a lead role. And it's great. So I want that because I think not just because I want more representation for my own group, but also just because I think it's better for the medium. I think that if you are attempting to convey a story, then the better you can convey that story, the better job you're doing.
Right. Also, just the other level of like, okay, so if she's playing a trans man, like, why not then, if you absolutely don't want to cast a trans actor, why not cast a guy? Yeah. Like, there's that whole other level of like, well, all right, why are we casting a woman?
Would you like the answer to that? Yeah. Well, because they see us as something else. They see us as someone dressing up.
Well, and let's just acknowledge how different this is just in the past couple of years, because I think Eddie Redmayne was really praised for his portrayal of Lily, forgive me, in The Danish Girl.
Yeah, The Danish Girl. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we're all in agreement on this one, yeah?
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. V, what do you got for us tonight?
We are talking about Congresswoman Omar. and the Send Her Back chant that happened in, I think it was North Carolina, was it? South Carolina? One of the Carolinas.
Yeah, and not just that, but I mean, reverberating through the sound bites and the clips, and I mean, it's all over really in a lot of ways.
It's all over at this point. And whether or not that's kind of an atheist issue, and I would say it is for actually a couple of reasons. On the most basic level, like, she is different. And different equals bad to these people. So on that level alone.
So these people, are we talking about people who are predominantly Christian, people who are predominantly in the majority? I mean,
I wouldn't say either of those things. I would say that the people who would probably attend a Trump rally, unironically, who currently hold a position of power right now.
Sure.
I wouldn't go so far as to say it's all Christians or all conservatives at all. But there is that very loud minority right now who is kind of swaying public opinion.
It has a lot of power right now in politics. Sure.
Exactly. So there's that, that level of like, okay, well, if this person who is different for this reason is not safe, then other people who are different for other reasons are also not safe. But also, there are a couple other reasons. There's the obvious, atheism and skepticism kind of go hand in hand, and the ability to just pick up on a chant that loaded and that complex and that's difficult and like tenuous and like, and just like, I'm just going to chant this thing now because everyone else is doing it. That's a level of groupthink and a level of like mindless, agreement that I think is just generally not beneficial to pursuing an atheist or skeptic agenda. Not that atheists have an agenda. That's a loaded term right there.
And to me, it is reminiscent of the back and forth sort of singing and chanting and reciting things that you see in a big church.
Oh yeah, no, it's call and response. It's very ritualistic and very much like that for sure. And then finally, just the fact that she is being criticized for being anti-Semitic, for criticizing or even just commentating on certain lobbying groups that are very pro-Israel, that has its roots in a very specific type of Christianity that is influencing our foreign policy. So yeah, I would say on multiple levels, it is an atheist issue.
Yeah, so questions of race, questions of, I guess, Zionism, and, I don't want to be hyperbolic or throw out, like, the cult of Trump, as if, but we are talking about some religion-esque type things.
Yeah.
So for all of those reasons, this does feel like something that positive atheism has a responsibility to respond to. Is that kind of where we're coming down on this?
I would say so. What do you think?
Yeah, and I don't think that the cult of Trump is hyperbolic at all. I mean, we literally see people talking about him, being a prophet and like God calling judgment if he's not elected and stuff.
Did you see they want to add another book in the Bible, the Book of Trump? There is an entire group of people who think that that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. Whether we're talking about old religions or just really dumb new ones, positive atheism on the march, and so this is one we're calling out.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so far, I suppose we're in agreement.
Well, that's no fun. We've got to argue.
Right? Okay. Well,
right.
let's see if we can disagree with me here.
I'm getting ready to be contentious.
Yeah, okay, right. Yeah, hit me with your best shot. Okay, so there are bills currently working their way through both the House and the Senate, proposing the idea that the U.S. Soccer Federation should not fund the Men's World Cup when FIFA comes to America and also Canada and Mexico in 2026. Unless there is pay equality between the U.S. men's national team and the U.S. women's national team, right? So this is getting, I know I just threw a lot of words, but what we're talking about here is the fact that as Americans, we have the most dominant, incredibly successful soccer team more or less in the history of the world.
Yes.
As a not really soccer playing nation in a lot of ways. And I know that there are a lot of people who disagree with that, and I think that that's great. I think that it is a grassroots sport. I want to acknowledge all of the fans that it has, but it's FIFA in America is not the NFL. It's not NASCAR. I mean, by dollars, NASCAR is more popular than any of this.
Yeah, and they're just always turning left.
Yeah, which baffles me. But despite the fact that we have a rather mediocre, middle of the pack at best men's team, they are generally making significantly more money than the women are. And so this is a question that I went into with really a poor understanding of the dynamics at play here because, first of all of this is part of the U.S. Soccer Federation. And so both the men's and women's team effectively have the same employer, right? So this is not the case of, should just completely disparate companies be matching each other's pay.
Right.
And then the other quick argument is the idea that people's pay should be based on like the value that they bring to the organization, right? And so regardless of whether or not the men are as successful as the women, if more people are going and buying tickets at men's games, if they're generating more revenue.
And they are.
It makes sense that would be a major factor. And we can talk about whether or not our country should be doing a better job of just not being dicks about women in sports. I think that we've got a lot to say about that. But looking specifically at the question of whether or not Congress should be passing a bill to balance these two things is a question that has come up because the women's national team has filed a lawsuit. And I'm not a lawyer and I'm not looking to litigate this controversy or get into the legal specifications. But what I'm realizing through all of this research and through getting into the nitty-gritty of this is that in reality, there's a very compelling argument that the women's team is generating as much or more money than the men's team is. The reality is that ticket sales and things that are directly tied to games make up only about a quarter of the budget for the U.S. Soccer Federation. And it's really hard to say whether like sponsorships or TV package deals or any of these things are more affected by men's sports or women's sports because the viewership is difficult to track. So as I kind of read through all of this, the meme, the headline, the thing that grabs you is equal pay for equal work. Totally. Sure. If the women are more successful, if they're playing more games than the men, then they should be getting more pay than the men, right? But as you dive into the particulars, it's very clear that both of these teams within this organization are working with players' unions. They're collectively bargaining. Their deals have changed in recent years, and there are all of these different factors coming into play. The men aren't given like a base level salary. They don't have the same insurance and other benefits that the women are getting, because they didn't bargain for them, because they didn't want that, because they're getting those benefits by and large through other programs, whereas the women don't have access to that because there is no I shouldn't say there is no MLS for women. However, it doesn't have the same effect. And then we also can talk about the purse that FIFA puts on, which has nothing to do with choices made by the U.S. Soccer Federation and how they are paying more out to the men's teams because they are generating more revenue in other countries and in these big things. All of this to say, I don't know whether or not they should win their lawsuit or whether or not they will win their lawsuit, whether they were actually discriminated against based on their gender. That's something that legal minds will really need to dive into and tear through because these contracts and negotiations are complex and complicated for a lot of reasons. Question on the table, though, is should Congress do something to create a level of equity between these two? And I guess I would position to y'all that I think that they do in this instance have a responsibility to, because the women's team is being seen as an icon. And they are representatives of our nation, and they are unprecedentedly successful, and yet not making as much as their peers who are playing on women's national teams for other nations. And so I would suggest that even if we're uncomfortable with free enterprise being interrupted by these laws that seek to make everyone equal, when the reality of the world is that, equity is different from equality and all these complexities, I do think that there's good reason to believe that this would set a great precedent and would be an important thing to stand behind for women in America. So that's my complex breakdown of somebody who doesn't watch soccer, trying really hard to understand what is actually a pretty confusing subject.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thoughts?
Oh my gosh. I'm trying to be contentious here. Mostly all I'm just thinking about is how awesome Megan Rapinoe is. Yeah. You know, I've been around a while, and I've been in Texas for most of that time, and, you know, they talk about sports a lot here.
Uh-huh. Not so much soccer.
Not so much soccer. But I can say legitimately that in the past couple of years is the first I've really heard buzz about women's soccer at all. And that's just because of how fucking amazing the U.S. women's soccer team has become.
Back-to-back World Cups.
And they're absolutely phenomenal, and they are bringing attention to it. They're basically doing a service to the sport, and certainly to the U.S. sport. And I think that is going to be at least a massive benefit financially, economically. So if something is not done...
The entire U.S. Soccer Federation, including the men's teams.
Exactly. So if something is not done to give them incentive to that by someone, then we're going to lose that. And that's not hopefully what we want if we're not, idiots.
Yeah. Are we comfortable with the role of government stepping in? Because, if we think of government as a watchdog that's supposed to look out for the little guy among other folks, and I mean, even that term, frankly, is sexist now that I hear myself say it. But as we're talking about women being disadvantaged, is this a place where they have a responsibility to step in?
I'm very curious to see what kind of precedent that would set, and what exactly people would do with that ruling outside of this particular area. For me, I don't know if I agree that they necessarily have to weigh in on the payment issue, but I did read something, and I'm probably going to butcher this, but apparently there have only been male CEOs of, I don't know if it's FIFA or the soccer.
So FIFA is outside of the purview of anything American, and is frankly both a gigantic and super corrupt organization.
Yeah.
That
was the U.S. Soccer Organization League, whatever it's called. But there's never been a female CEO, and they are both under kind of the same CEO, the same umbrella, same management. And so the thing that I saw proposition that might be a nice middle ground would be to make a ruling to separate the two into two separate organizations under that same umbrella, so that it's no longer one organization making all of the rules, but again, it kind of splits it up and makes it more competitive in that way, and kind of gives them a little bit more agency. And kind of removes them from that very corrupt...
More opportunity for, I guess, the free market to decide who's getting paid what.
Right. So less about the actual, you must pay them this much, and more about, we acknowledge that something is wrong here and that you aren't getting the opportunity that you need. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the Amateur Sports Act and kind of separate you guys and let you guys do your own thing and fund you guys separately.
And that would give more clarity to things that you were talking about being fuzzy, where, you don't know if they're actually bringing in more than it's
right. Oh, that's a good point, too. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Well, so I guess if we have to make a ruling, we have 2 in favor of Congress acting and 1 sort of conditional
on the fence.
In favor? Yeah. Okay. All right.
Megan Rapinoe, you get more money.
Slightly more contentious.
Well, I hope that a few of y'all have some thoughts about the things that we've been discussing. We're going to be getting into a few more controversies, but we would love to hear what's been kind of annoying you about other people's opinions. Clearly, there are people who are wrong on the internet.
I've heard that.
And if you would like to give us a call to complain about it, we're going to be here at 512-686-0279. If you think that we are wrong, call and complain about it, 512-686-0279. Okay, I also wanted to talk about Netflix's decision to re-edit a episode of 13 Reasons Why. So this is a show that came out 2 years ago, and I can say that as somebody who at the time was working for the National Suicide Prevention Line, not only did I hear a lot about it, but I felt obligated to watch it, and I myself was pretty disgusted with the way that they went about it. And I want to be very clear that I personally believe, not speaking for the show or the ACA, but I like the idea of an artist being able to represent any form of art that they choose to. Being able to make a show about suicide, being able to make a show about teenage suicide, being able to make a show about anything that they feel is significant or meaningful or worth discussing. At the same time, I do feel like there is a moral responsibility and an obligation to make sure that you're putting that in front of the appropriate eyes. And when we're talking about a show that is targeted at teens, that is readily available on Netflix, on your phone, on your school bus, in junior high for many people, even as we factor in the responsibility of parents and these different things, I feel like Netflix, a company that I know we're going to continue to talk about, but that I genuinely believe has a good track record of being responsible in these types of spaces, acted really inappropriately by allowing this show to go out in the form that it was. Over the past couple of years, because of constant criticism, they slowly added like some bumpers at the end of the episode that said, if you or someone you know is having suicidal thoughts, call this number. All of that could have been easily done before it went live. It could have been done the second they got a complaint. There's no way that they could have responsibly made a show about teenage suicide without actually investigating that or talking to some of the experts. And I know some of the experts, and I have a pretty good goddamn idea what they would say, that it was absolutely reckless of them to put this show out targeted towards teenagers in the way that they did, because it's true that people died because of this program. There have been a number of studies showing a statistical bump that can't be directly attributed to, but that experts generally agree is because of this show. And in addition to that, we just have tons and tons and tons of data about how when there's a high-profile suicide, when there's somebody in the media who has died of this, when there's somebody at your school, when there's somebody in your sort of general culture who dies from suicide, it can be contagious in a lot of ways. So I think it was terribly irresponsible for them to put it out in the way that they did. I think that editing that one scene from the episode is really a failure to do anything meaningful other than maybe just drum up more controversy as they lead into season 3 coming up soon. And I have to say, I feel really frustrated by the whole thing. And the only way that I feel like Netflix could win me over or convince me that they're on the right side of this is if they did about 10 times more than they did. The fact that it took badgering and badgering and badgering for them to eventually add these bumpers, and that they then got badgered more and more and more, and so they kind of changed the tone of the show a little bit. And the way that they're just so slowly reacting is not sufficient for me. And
also, they're still capitalizing on it. They're still putting out another season.
Absolutely. So I can't help but feel like they're on the wrong side of history. That's my take. What do y'all think?
I personally didn't see the show primarily because of what it was about. When I was in undergrad, I did have some struggles with that. And I remember Robin Williams died around, I think it was my sophomore year. And I was, first of all, devastated, but also the outpouring of attention and affection and the news cycles and everybody talking about how much they loved him. You know, that was an interesting experience for somebody who played around with that kind of thought process where it was like, oh, look at all the attention he's getting. Look how much they love him. Like, this could be a legitimate way to get attention, which it isn't. And it's an interesting balance to be like, yes, we must honor the people who have passed in whatever way they end up passing, but also, yeah, there's that risk of sensationalizing it and making it into something that is attractive in this weird way.
And to be clear, this show did that.
Right.
You know, this show
Yeah.
very much presented a glamorized, people will continue to obsessively think about you and be
Right.
affected by you
You'll
after you're
affect
gone.
lives. You'll suddenly become somebody whose name is known. Yeah, so especially for something targeted at teenagers on a platform that is, like you said, readily available. It's not a NC-17 movie that you got to get into a theater to see. This is something that anyone of any age could technically get their hands on. So yeah, I kind of disgusted by the whole thing, honestly.
Sure.
Yes. Yeah, we're not going to disagree on this one. Like we were saying with Daryl on the 4th, you know, some things, you know, we want artists to be able to express things, and they can be, you know, valid and very appropriate in some things, but it's also this sea that we're swimming in of this media. And, you know, we're very much like a streaming media culture now. And Netflix is very much the flagship of that. And so when something new is on Netflix, and especially if they push it, like it was certainly one of their flagship
Yeah,
It was on
absolutely.
billboards.
shows,
It was
yeah.
everywhere.
then that is going to be everywhere. And if it's something that is notorious, what am I looking for? Infamous. It's got that edge to it. You know, that's gonna just bore into.
It's dark enough to be really interesting and attractive to somebody experiencing teenage angst and suicidal thoughts.
Yeah, exactly the sort of people that are going to watch that and have the worst kind of effect of it. And it just, I can't even imagine the kind of decision making that went into this, that, you know, some meeting was had somewhere that someone brought this up. Definitely someone brought this stuff up, and no one, you know, put the kibosh on it somehow.
Yeah, that's what it is for me, is that you don't spend this much money, you don't create this kind of budget, you don't have this sort of machine without somebody somewhere saying, hey, like, we should probably talk to an expert on this. And and by all accounts, they did talk to experts and ignored them because they thought that they were being hyperbolic. And I mean, I don't doubt that somebody listening to this right now is thinking to themselves, the people who are going to kill themselves are going to do it anyway. They're just going to blame it on this or that or the other.
And if you are, call in.
Yeah, I welcome that disagreement, but I will say that the statistics, the science just doesn't bear it out. We've actually done an incredible amount of research on suicidality in the past 10 years, and we have learned so much about how our brains are really hijacked by these kinds of experiences, and it really only takes one brief moment of a strong suicidal thought at the wrong time to end a life. You know, plenty of people live with suicidal thoughts every day and still go on to have incredibly successful careers, families, lives. But for some folks, if they are in the wrong place at the wrong time, a very brief depression can end a life.
Williams.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.